As the 9th ordinary meeting of the 171st session of the Queen's University of Belfast Literary and Scientific Society! Thank you very much, because I was busy on the floor. So, before we begin, and I don't even have my cue card, what is this? Before we begin, we're going to have some announcements. Firstly, on the announcement front, we've got a debate at IV coming up in Cork. Here it is. So if you want to have a gavel, all of it. So that's the thing, I thought, do you know what would be really funny? If I started the debate from coming up from on the floor. And it just didn't work. So we're just going to move on from there and pretend that didn't happen. So, first announcement. Written there, mate. Right, there we go. The Cork IV, which will be on the 23rd to 24th of November. I mentioned this last week. This is a great opportunity for speakers to go down, get on the busway and go down to Cork, to their lovely campus, for a weekend of debate. You'll get to know new people there, new people from within the Literary, new people at Cork University. It'll be a weekend of debates and going to the pub as well afterwards. So if you want to sign up for that, please either message the Facebook page or speak to our external convener, Ms. Beckham, who will be here in about 10-15 minutes. I'm really out of breath from that running, sorry. Here we go. So, for those of you who don't know, next week is our Godkin debate. This is our debate for novice speakers, so people who either haven't spoken before or made their first speech this year. If you want to have a go at debating, I very much consider you have a go at this. This is a debate for best speaker. Normally it's best team, like vote and speaker ability, but this is a judged debate where there'll be two teams of hopefully 4 speakers discussing that motion, and your skills of debate will be tested, and it is all in all a great evening. It was my entry into the society. I was forced into it by a certain Mr. Matthew Bryson, having never heard what a literary was before, and let's just say it went pretty well. So if you want to have a go at that, please message the Facebook page or our internal convener, Mr. Russell Mann, who is not here tonight, but he will be around. So there's the logo. Any more announcements I can think of?
Mr. President?
Yes!
I understand that my language hasn't been of the best the past couple of weeks, and the fine system had accumulated that I owed you a Jeep.
No, you didn't. You owed me a nice Jeep.
A nice Jeep?
And a Twix.
Well, I can say that we're using all our nice Jeeps in our landlord for smuggling things.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, how did we bring the fine system to something that the President would enjoy? I understand the President is very fond of memes.
Yeah.
And you bear in mind this society used to find import, and I thought, how can I link alcohol with memes? So I present to you as my fine.
A little bit of the bubbly.
Oh, I accept this fine. For those of you who are interested, this is some of the finest Jeep bought. Still haven't got the Twix, but we'll wait for that probably. I'm really kind of disappointed that younger had a Chloe, just in case I start drinking, because that's a whole kettle of fish. We used to find in port, we changed it for various reasons, but I'm back to the point. I was really disappointed that you gave that fine, because I had like this whole thing mapped out. I had a whole plan for how I was going to essentially pressure Connor into buying me a Jeep.
Yeah, that's pressure selling, that's illegal.
No, it's not, because what was going to happen, and this wasn't my idea, my mother was going to bring our car, our actual car, down to our local dealership and get a photo of her giving the car into the dealership. We were going to put our car up online as a fake sale and stuff, and mock up a Gumtree image and post it on the Literary forum, and then I was going to take it so far. I printed something out that I hadn't got in my pocket this week, but I would have had in my pocket if I remembered it, and it was going to go really far. But I'm glad we've got Port, because it looks shiny.
It's not worth a little bit of bubbly. It actually is a bit of the bubbly.
A little bit of the bubbly. I don't know the alcohols. What actually is it?
It's sparkling wine, yeah.
It's sparkling wine.
Whatever Strenuous Offense has to offer me.
Wonderful.
You support
So, thank you for offering a little bit of the bubbly. So I think that's... Oh no, the hat's come off the gavel. So I think that's it for announcements this week. She doesn't have a theme music this week, so please welcome someone who I've seen trip over a pavement because she was distracted by a pointy building, our secretary, Miss Chloe Ferguson.
Okay, so on Thursday the 7th of November, 42 members of the Literary and Scientific Society of Queen's University of Belfast met to debate a motion, This House Regrets Rainbow Capitalism. The evening met in the Senate room, and after a batch of announcements and minutes, we moved to ratify the Society Charity of the Year. Essentially, this is a charity where if we have charity events, something similar to like a quiz or something, and that's where Gurdala is going. So the House in a unanimous vote ratified Aware Now, a mental health charity which operates at local levels across communities offering counselling services. So this did not come as a surprise to the council because, let's be honest, who wants to be that asshole who votes against giving money to A, charity, and B, mental health? Private members of this began by Mr. Russell Nairn, holding in his hand a mostly empty bottle of Lucozade, stating his despair in the Library of Light, which, let's be honest now, is a weekly occurrence that Russell just gets up, stands usually over there, and just gurns at the library for probably at least 5 minutes. So Mr. Nairn raised to the floor a recent Galaxy-brained article about climate change by our Lord and Saviour, everyone's favourite funny man, Mr. Jeremy Clarkson. At which Oldham Expiring actually responded, free speech occasionally has its downsides. Mr. Oldham Expiring, proving his own point, then went on to explain his own self-titled crack dog theory on climate change, that the removal of carbon from the atmosphere is the equivalent of taking the heroin away from a drug addict. It actually does more harm than good. Mr. Chris Hubble, of course, responded by a poem, promising there was a point to it, but let's be honest, is there ever really a point to Chris's poetry? It would have worked better if he was here, but yeah. The other piece of private members' business comes from Miss Lois McCullough, who brought to the House the return of university strikes, forcing students to lose class time. Concerns were raised on the floor around compensation of fees for missed classes, and Mr. Jason Bunting, Maz Lad, an education officer for the Students' Union, stated that lecture working conditions are learning conditions, so we must stand together. I had one main thought when this whole thing was going around. I think I said it to a few before, like, who of you actually goes to class anyway? Like, who is this going to affect? Because even if you did, in the wildest circumstances, go to class, because a wild concept there, are you really going to go a few weeks, like a week before Christmas, a week before deadlines? I've been that sucker who's gone to that class. It is deadly, it's quiet. So to me that seemed unlikely. Now, on to President's question, and I'll be honest, I was dreading writing these ones up, mainly due to the fact you were all dry last week. Like, honestly, since when does anyone in any President's questions want to know about the functioning of this society? Like, it was all the questions about, like, intellectual, like, so how's the society, like, what's going on? So Mr. Russell Nairn, in a slight tangent from that, the only one who didn't ask about the society, essentially, asked the President if he could be driven to economic ruin by any famous capitalist throughout history. Which would you pick and why? President Bradley went for the obvious choice, slightly claiming Reggie Fils-Aimé, I think I pronounced that correctly, the former president of Nintendo, connecting spiritually with him on his famous phrase, "My body is ready." Mr. Montgomery brought to the president's attention that Queen Lizzie is back, which is a reference to that photo down there for those of you who aren't aware. And it's kind of a running joke in the outfit that the painting's always there, watching for a photograph, watching over us. Mr. Gumler expresses happiness at this return, and as President Bradley displays that Lizzie had taken the spotlight from him in his withering claw-like grasp, did not express delight at this revelation, but instead, in what some would call treason to the values of a true Northdown man, Bradley Bush just swapped the photo out of his loving and adoring queen, going with his own wee smug bake. On with you, lad. Other President's questions were taken from Mr. John MacDonald, Miss Rachel Beck, Mr. Matt Lee, and Mr. Jack Patton. Moving on with the evening, the House took a vote of prior opinion on the motion, This House regrets rainbow capitalism, with 22 votes for the proposition, 5 votes for the opposition, and no abstentions. The debate for the evening commenced with Miss Emily Monroe, a maiden speaker, stating that rainbow capitalism is an exploitation of the LGBT community, pushing a pretense of inclusion to extract as much money as possible. This is a symbolic victory. Capitalism exists to take money and make money, and if it means selling us rainbows while supporting the politicians who want to bring them back, it means the companies will do as such. Also, maiden speaker, Miss Bevan Tankard spoke first for the opposition, advocating that representation is key, and for some, they may not see it anywhere else but from advertising. Forms of ownership and identity can be important, especially when seen as replicated by the everyday person. Speaking second for the proposition was Mr. Matthew Sullivan, HLM, our House's favourite cynic, and Mr. Sullivan told the House that no corporations give a damn about their business apart from the right to make money. Increasing the rate of rent is parallel with the rate of profit you give them. This social engineering affects company perception. So Ms. Targrace Connolly spoke second for the opposition, stating that there is an inherent aspect of good to this symbolic victory. In fact, it was this symbolic victory which led to real change. Ms. Connolly pointed to an inherent link between capitalism and liberalism, having LGBT representation in the mainstream narrative, allowing issues and problems to be discussed. Mr. Eltham expired tied together the proposition, expressing that rainbow capitalism has forgotten the individuality of the LGBT community, and is not the place of corporations to take advantage of a struggle. This is preaching to the already converted instead of interacting with real capitalism where change can be made. Closing for the opposition and the debate as a whole, Mr. Chris Hubble advocated that we should look for active involvement in corporations in issues. We should be thankful now that we're all just being exploited on an equal level. Yes, exploitation, a great thing. So questions for us from Mr. Russell Nairn, Mr. Matthew Kelly, Mr. Matthew Lee, Mr. Tom McGuinness, Ms. Rachel Beck, and Ms. Jocelyn Stockstead. A vote on the Speaker building is taken with 7 votes for opposition, 23 votes for opposition, and 15 votes for the abstentions, meaning opposition won on the motion. This House regrets rainbow capitalism. May I take the minutes as read?
Aye. That's not my name.
It's not your name.
There we go. So, as usual, it's time for us to move on to a round of private members' business. So, does anyone have any thoughts for this week?
Make them entertaining, please.
Yes, please state your name for the minutes and make it entertaining.
Tom McGuinness. So, as some of you might be aware, recently a new trailer for the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog movie was announced. Now, we have in this society previously discussed Nightmare Sonic, the previous incarnation of everyone's favourite speedy blue boy, who looked like he was going to sneak into your room at night and steal your skin. The updated version no longer looks quite so much like he would break into your room at night, flay your flesh from your bones, and devour it in front of your still living eyes, but it's still a little unnerving. Does the House believe that the countless hours of exerting work put in by animators to undo the damage done by the lunatics who first brought Nightmare Sonic into our minds was worth it, considering that the movie itself is still probably going to be pish?
You made a face as like we can find him for that, but I added an SH.
No, it wasn't the word used, it was the opinion.
So, any thoughts on Sonic? Yes. You say name for the minutes, please.
I think it was absolutely worth it. I think hats off to Paramount Pictures. They actually listened to the people. They listened to feedback and they actually did something. How many times has this ever happened in the history of corporations? Ever. I think it deserves many applause. Well done, Paramount.
That was so sad and lovely.
I don't care.
Well, the thing is, it was quite sad and, as you said, quite lonely, but he was so happy throughout, which is, it warms my still cold heart. Are there any more opinions? Yes, please state your name for the minute, please.
Jonathan Warner, as lovely as I thought that speech was,
Wow.
I have to say that I actually would have preferred if they had kept original Nightmare Sonic, mainly for the reason that it would have been much more entertaining, ironically, and could have been like a challenge. Can you actually sit through the entirety of this awful film, this awful main character design?
Wow. Any other thoughts on this issue? Yes, at the back of the coat stand, can you state your name for the minute, please?
Laura,
Yes.
I got like a wee Nintendo book, but I've also got like a video radio video, like a notebook. I have my notes on the issue that you were speaking about, but I don't have to change the subject from video games to that.
We can open up separate bits of private members' business later after this topic after we
I'm
finish this
sorry,
topic.
no, this Nintendo's great, but I can the video game involvement in Nintendo, just
Right.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's absolutely okay. And I thought you were wanting to change the subject to something
I
else.
did to back to homelessness. Not homelessness, but what you were debating, what you were saying on the mental health, and how not in education, employment or training, the drag and cause because of mental health and involved Yeah. No,
Yeah, so what we're going to do, so the way the segment works,
this
That's absolutely okay. I'll explain again because I do recognise there are quite a few new faces in here as well. So what happens through Private Members business is someone will raise an issue. So say it's for this example Sonic, all people put up their hands, they chime in on that issue, and then once I've decided that's done, I'll go, are there any other bits, and we'll move on. So we're going to yeah, so what was brought up was there's an upcoming film based on Sonic the Hedgehog, and the previous design for him was terrifying. So they've updated the design, and it looks a bit more like what people were used to. So that's the current topic. Yes.
Well, when you walked in, I was doing the minutes from last week, so it's that section.
Oh, that was from last week.
No, but like if you want to talk about it again after.
Yeah. Okay, doke.
Sorry.
We can bring up mental health after this. Any other perspectives on Sonic the Hedgehog? Yes, we'll just take one or two. Yes, Mr. J. Radcliffe.
Jay Radcliffe. So, I'm very much in favour of the new Sonic redesign. It looks a lot better. However, I would like to propose a conspiracy theory. Because if you think back to the other trailer, how many shots of Sonic in motion were there? I propose that this is all an elaborate marketing strategy to drum up controversy around the terrible design, and they've been secretly working on the good design of Sonic for several years now.
Oh, any thoughts on this? I've got my own opinions on it, but yes, we stay in for the minutes, please.
Alan Conley Galway. I'd just like to remind everyone who didn't see it that Paramount signed off on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film a few years ago, which had far worse, in my opinion, character designs than the Nightmare Sonic. And designed upon that, I doubt the conspiracy. I'm very high with that.
Yes, we'll finally Mr. Thomas.
Just a brief point of contention. While the designs of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were genuinely hideous and baffling, they did not have Nightmare Sonic's human teeth perfectly designed for blending flesh from bone. So no, I would contend your point, though I would agree with you. Yeah, I don't think this was a mistake. I do think this was a mistake. I think this was, just design studios wanting to, have their own marketing, their own version of the character. But I do think that the immense amount of work that must have gone into completely redesigning this animation wasn't worth it, because I think what it's going to be now is another forgettable cartoon mascot in a real life setting movie, when it could have been just this astonishing ode to the perils of the modern movie complex, modern movie industry, and just this fantastic. No one's going to remember this movie now. If it had been 90 minutes of James Marsden trailing around with Nightmare Sonic and his hideous human eyes and human teeth and his fingers that weren't quite gloves, his gloves that were made of his own skin. We could have had that. They took that away from us. And I do think it's not going to be worth it. So much work went into this. People probably worked through the night. People worked 24-hour days to achieve acceptable Sonic. That it's going to be forgotten. In 2 years it'll be forgotten, and whereas Nightmare Sonic will remain with us until we die, and for some time afterwards.
And on that cheery note, gotta go fast. So are there any other separate bits of private members' business? We'll take yours at the back there by the coat stand. Laura. Hello, Laura. Yes.
Worried about me failing to be interested.
Oh no, absolutely, no. This is the bit where everyone gets to have a go at bringing up issues. People can bring things up. So if you want to bring up the topic about homelessness and mental health, now you can do it. We can have a discussion. You can stand if you want, but don't go under pressure. Don't. Very relaxed.
So, Sonic the Hedgehog and everything.
Yeah, I know we've moved on from Sonic now. Sonic's run away into the green hills far away.
Sorry. So, we're going to talk about non education, employment or training really briefly. As in how big circumstances and mental health issues and stuff.
Very briefly, so you said you just bring the topic up, so like a couple of sentences about a paragraph. Okay, no.
I think which one's the best. Give me a second.
Do you want us to move on to another bit and then we can come back to you?
If you want.
No, it's absolutely okay. So if you find the bit that you want to read out, we can.
This is just,
Okay.
this is from, it's just moving on from this one page. This is from PowerShell 2, and it's the quotation. Love is just a chemical, we give it meaning. And that's related to homelessness, mental health as well, because, well, I really like that game, PowerShell 2, but it's just, it brings tears to me because I suffer from mental health problems myself. And I could have been homeless and I would pass homeless people every single day. And it just makes me very upset and stuff.
Okay, doke.
And it's to do with mental health. Homeless is concerned for mental health issues, especially the female homeless, which upset me the most. That's that. But it is a video dish, so
Yeah.
I decided to write it down because it's not my favourite quote, it's my partner's favourite quote. And he doesn't have any mental health issues, so he looks after me 24/7. And his favourite quote is, love is just chemical. I might have a chemical amounts in my own brain, but he says that I still love him and he loves me. So love is just a chemical. We give it meaning. PowerShell to Eleanor.
Good. I haven't played PowerShell 2, but any like opinions on that topic? We'll go to Mr. Ryan Hoey first.
So recently I was in something for Nolan Live. There was a woman who was coming on as a guest, and she does a lot of work with the homeless, so sort of providing meals and everything. And she was saying to me, and well, one of the people who were with her was saying to me that when they go and help homeless people, that mental health issues are a very big problem that they face. And even when they've managed to get people accommodation in Belfast, they still have problems staying in that accommodation because mainly because of mental health issues, and it's a very important point that has been raised.
Any other thoughts on that? Generally? Yes, Mr. McGinnis.
I think it's a very important point, and I'm sorry for slightly derailing it with conversations regarding horrific hedgehogs. But I think no, it is really important, and it's something that we don't talk about enough. It's something that it's a massive problem in our society. Not only the care of those with mental health, which is just astonishing. The practice of sectioning people is. Can lead people being put under care against their will, can lead people undergoing painful treatments against their will. There is a very, there's a lot that we need to improve about our attitudes both towards the people with mental health issues and towards people with who are homeless. And a lot of it, it comes down to both the government and the people, acting, destigmatizing these issues. On social media, destigmatizing them in our conversations, and putting more money out there to take care of people with mental health and people who are homeless in actual, effective and compassionate ways.
Are there any other thoughts on this? I'd like to say just generally to the room on the topic of mental health, if you are struggling and you do find yourself struggling, university can be a tough time, reach out. I know there are things within the Students' Union that can do that. Queen's offers, I think, 4 free counselling sessions via a service called Inspire. So if you feel that you're struggling a bit, it's not for like when you've hit rock bottom, it's for when you think you could be struggling. Definitely reach out, because I didn't know about this when I started Queen's, and I only found out about that in the 3rd year. So make sure you do it. It's not, they wouldn't put your problems too level. And in fact, the fact that there was a juxtaposition with Sonic there, I think, shows the importance of discussing various issues here. At Letter, I think we address all issues, whether they are big issues like mental health and homelessness, or the trivial things like a blue hedgehog. It's important to have debates about such a variety of topics. I'm very proud that our society does that. Oh no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that we've done quite a few. That was what I was trying to say. So I'm very proud that we were able to discuss such a wide variety of topics. Mr. Colcall, from.
So this week in Dáil, a TD called Greenish asked the Taoiseach to investigate money being sent from those from Nigeria who were working and paying their tax in Ireland back to Nigeria. Now, it was quite suspect that he focused on one particular nation of people to question the data about, and it was unequivocally and clearly dog whistling to those on the far right and those who are racist, and it was clearly wrong. Upon subsequent investigation of Noel's website, he stated proudly that many of his family had gone to America and sent money home to his number constituency. So this is a point I want to raise, and it's sort of emerging in Irish politics, it's emerging in politics in Britain as well, is this sort of dog whistling, as it's called, for some really hideous and terrible positions that have really entered our mainstream politics, and something that is incredibly worrying. I just want to know what the House's view is on this.
That's hands up. Mr. McGinnis again, you've got a lot of opinions.
I always have opinions. It's a bane of this society. It's obviously it's a massive problem. This, I mean, in general, a lot of the fears of around immigration. I personally believe immigration to be an entirely false idea. I think it's largely been a problem that consists almost entirely of dog whistles. But I think what always tickles me is whenever you see these discussions of racists from Ireland, is always fascinating to see, because so much of this, the nonsense they're coming out with has been directed against their own community. I think a particular favourite of mine is, there was a very sort of far figure, Gemma, something, her name escapes me, but she posts a picture. No, she posts a picture of a halal grocery shop in Ireland. It's like, the Muslims, they're taking over, they're forcing their culture on us. And their replies were just a flood of pictures of Irish pubs from around the world, which and it's really, for a community that has been so, who's been consistently caught targets of prejudices, and is such a diasporic community as the Irish. It's this idea of racism or exclusionism from our own is insane, and it needs to be called out more and ridiculed constantly.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on? Yes, Mr. Matthew Solomon.
Yeah, I think it's a classic example of politicians misdirecting people's anger from the people who are actually harming them to a group that then can't properly defend themselves. It's like saying, yes, the reason that you are poor and you can't afford your rent, it's not because of landlords. No, it's because of the black people sending their money back to Nigeria. And the idea of this, obviously, is to make people angry at a group who can't do anything about that anger, can't defend themselves, and take that anger away from, the landlords and the people who are actually causing this economic inequality.
Here. Any other final thoughts? Yes, you say in a minute, please.
Buddy, like Robert. I think the Western world is having a difficult time with globalization, even though they started it. They don't mind when they come over to the East and make things more westernized. They think they have better hospitals, better education systems, but they don't like it when they start to realize they're being mixed with other cultures. And coming from a country with a million different cultures, it's amazing. It is. I'm just hoping for the Western world to realize how wonderful it is to be globalized and to be so culturally diverse in the same country, and hopefully they'll accept that.
So I think that brings our private members' business to a close. So I forgot to do the agenda this week. Look at that. Look at that lack of productivity.
What are you at?
I don't know what I'm at. I'm just in a really weird mood tonight, so that private members' business is done. Tick! So, it's time for President's Questions. So if anyone's got any questions for me, this is the bit where you ask me things about society, although generally it's just a case to ridicule me at the front. Please raise your hand. Yes, can you stay there for minutes, please?
Hi, my name is Jasmine Salstus. I'm wondering who chooses the debate topics and when they're chosen. So are all the ones for the spring already picked?
Oh, so this is an actual question about society that isn't awkward. This is a brilliant day. What we do is 2 times a year we will have what's called our internal meeting, which is where we'll meet up in a room, possibly in this room, possibly in a room in the SU, possibly in space, not in space, I made that up, and we will discuss a selection of motions. What motions? Well, a spreadsheet will be put up on our Facebook group, the Litter Reform. If you're a member of the society, message me and I will get you into it. Message anyone on council, we'll get you into it. A spreadsheet will be put up with various topics, and you can suggest motions. Any motion you want, put it on the spreadsheet, and then we meet up for a meeting and we discuss the motions, whittle it down a bit, and then it will get turned into a finalised term card by our internal convener, taking into account variety, collaborations with other societies, that kind of thing. When is the term card released? That's for us to know and you to nag us about until the day we go blue in the face. Because last year we released the term card, I wouldn't even say slightly later than normal.
Shocking.
And it was at the normal time, and the amount of people asking when the term card was coming out was beyond astonishing. I'm going to say, after dinner on Boxing Day. Constant pictures, constant memes, constant questions, when's the term card out?
That was the peak of the meme one. I think 50 memes a day. I just like, where's the term card?
I think, that just makes us more stubborn about not saying when the term card's out. So the term card will just appear, and then you can sign up for debate. So, long story short, spreadsheet, internal meeting, term card. Are there any other questions about that? What are those hands went up? Yes, we state the name for the minutes.
Yeah, Keir Gross here. As you know, I'm a new member of the Literific, and I wasn't familiar with this tradition of fines being paid in court. To me, it sounds like a wonderful idea, and I think it's one that should return promptly to the Literific. Connor's generous fine payment of this fine bottle of sparkling white wine as well.
Bubbly, please.
Bubbly. Have been, and therefore I would suggest, I don't understand why it would ever been scrapped in the first place, but I would suggest a swift return to this payment of fines in court.
Well, the Literific is a society with a long and confusing history, some of which involves very strange traditions. And the fine in court, we kind of scrapped it as not everyone in here drinks, and we're not sure that a fine in alcohol gives off the right image, hence why it was a fine of just whatever I can think of at the time. I didn't fully take into account how bad I am at thinking of things on the spot, which is why my answers to President's questions have been mildly amusing at best, and cringe at worst. Yeah, we kind of changed that this year. It's just one of those society traditions. All Literific was kind of like in a film when there's like an evil association. It's like the bearded guys around the table in the dark, and they were like, I don't know, I couldn't think of a metaphor in time, I can't think of things quickly. But yeah, that used to be a thing. There are various old Literific things that have either come back, disappeared, various things. So if you want to know any of them, ask me. Are there any other President's questions? Yes. Please state your name for minutes, please. I'm doing it for everyone now.
I was at NIB over the weekend for like a different society. Yes, it was great.
What? What society?
Trampolining.
Oh, that's different. That's a very different type of thing. I thought another society was doing debating IVs, so I was like, who's this? I was like, imagine a debate. Imagine turning up to a debating IV. Imagine Beckham and Min sending you off. You're like, I've got the speech ready. I'm like, no, you haven't. It's time to jump. Anyway, what was? What was the rest of that?
The whole weekend had a theme, and it was Harry Potter, and we had to dress up like for most of the time, and like whatever sort of character like we thought we would be from like a series or any spin-offs. And so my question to you is, if you were to be anyone from Harry Potter world, what would you be?
Wow, a Harry Potter themed trampolining weekend. That sounds like it had ups and downs. You're welcome! What character from Harry Potter would I be? I kind of feel a bit like Dumbledore at the front here in this robe, but I don't think that really reflects my personality. Snape? No, I don't think I fit Snape too well. I dress completely in black, and I hope I don't scare people. But no, I'm not sure. I'm going to just go for Dobby the house elf. I'm just going to go for him. I don't know why. I just think he's a really cool guy. So, are there any other President's questions? Yeah, that'll go on my gravestone. Dobby the house elf. He's a really cool guy. Yes, Mr. McConnell.
As the President should be aware, we might have a cuckoo tonight as a wee treat for everybody. If you were a late night Belfast nightclub, which late night Belfast nightclub would you be?
This is very surreal.
This is like the pub question over again.
This is like the pub question again, because you know fine well I don't have enough of a social life to know any of these places. I'm going to say Cuckoo because it's full of video games and people cry there. So I'm going to go for that. Are there any other final ones to wrap this up? Yes, Mr. Solomon.
I'm very familiar with the concept of a tea cozy. For anyone who isn't, A tea cozy is a little jumper that goes on a teapot to keep your teapot warm and its contents.
Yeah.
However, I'm having a bit of a crisis here. Because I cannot, for the life of me, comprehend the purpose of a gavel cozy. Why do you have a gavel cozy? Did you get one?
Oh, it's not a gavel cozy, it's a hat.
It's very cool.
Gavel isn't standing.
It's cold, Connor. It needs a hat.
Did you read it every day? Like in the
Yeah. Are there any other final questions? It was a poor little sad gavel hat. Are there any other final ones just to end this? No? Great, let's move on. So that's President's questions done. Oh, look at this. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to go through the rules of debate because I recognise there are quite a few new faces in here. So I'm going to roughly explain what is about to happen. So, as you can see in front of you, Connor has... He's just left. He's just left the room.
Don't eat, alright?
Oh, he's good for enjoy! So Connor's left to go to the toilet. As you can see, there are two teams of speakers at the front. So there's proposition, say hello, proposition, just wave. There, proposition are there, opposition are there. They propose and oppose the motion, so for and against. They will take it in turns to give 7-minute speeches, which will address the following argument. This House supports national security over individual liberty. Please follow us on social media. This floor is really slipping. So they'll give alternating 7-minute speeches. After the first minute of the speech, you will hear this noise. That means the first minute of protected time is over and you'll be able to ask a question. To ask a question to any of the speakers, please raise your hand and say either a point of information or on that point. The speaker can accept it, so take the question, or decline it. Now, if people keep asking questions or keep asking questions shortly after they've responded, that is known as barracking, and I'll tell you to stop and you'll have to put your hands down and you're not allowed to ask questions. You'll then hear at the 6th minute of the speech this noise. Good job. And that means that the last minute of protected time has begun. No more questions, and then after 7 minutes you will hear this noise, which means 7 minutes are up. Please finish your speech, and then I'll just keep hitting it until you. Yes, thanks. Thanks, Chloe! I think they've got the message. So, those are the rules of debate. But what do you all think? You've all seen this motion. You've all read it with your eyes. You've all heard me say it. Let's have a vote on what you think now. This is our vote of prior opinion. This is what you think about that motion right now. So if you support the motion, this House supports national security over individual liberty, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Raise your hand high, I'm 5'6".
Do you support the motion?
Okay. And so, all of those who do not support the motion, who wish to oppose the motion, this House supports national security over individual liberty, please raise your hands and say nay. Nay. Wow. And then all those who wish to abstain on the motion, meaning you either have no opinion or can be swayed one way or the other, please raise your hands and say, met. Madam Secretary, can you please brief back the vote of prior opinion?
Vote of prior opinion on the motion is House supports national security over individual liberty, has 10 votes of the opposition, 27 votes of the opposition, and 8 votes of the abstentions. In the vote of prior opinion, the opposition has it.
The opposition has it for now, everyone give a clap. So what's going to happen is we're going to hear speeches from all of our speakers, then we're going to move to a round of questions, then we're going to have a vote on the ability of the speakers, and then we're all going to clip-clop down to the practitioner bar for a nice pint or soft drink. So please welcome to propose the motion. This House was a national security over individual liberty. Ms. Ellis Watrin.
Good evening. quite aggressive subjects on national security and individual freedom. To begin this debate, I will make it clear that none of the paired person on the proposition is going to support some kind of dictatorship. We all deeply value the freedom that we are granted, and under only specific and necessary conditions would we allow individual freedom to live in it. The national security is the security and defense of a nation state, including its citizens, economy, and institutions. Regarding the duty of the government, it refers to several dimensions, both military and non-military. To the same extent that the government is entitled to the protection of the civilians and the territory against military attacks, it also ought to, amongst others, minimize the crime rates, economic instability, food uncertainties of terrorist threats over its soil and against its residents. Here's a time for a little story that will take us back to the 1950s France. The Second World War is over, leaving behind it a ravaged France. The total absence of investment during the war, coupled with the Axis analyzed bombings and scavengers, left the countries in ruins. The transport network is unusual. The currency has been devalued by 50% against the pound, and further devaluations are deemed inevitable. On top of that, the Communist Party had constituted itself a strong supportive and active base among the deprived French population, causing considerable civil upheavals in the spring of 1947. In sum, France was a complete and terrible mess. As early as 1944, Charles de Gaulle introduced the Dirigiste economic policy, where the states intervened strongly into the capitalist market economy, not only through regulations, but also by combining state capitalism and indicative economic planning. De Gaulle's economic program then implied state ownership of monopolistic firms controlling strategic economic sectors, and the tight control exercised by the state over the overall financial system. Such an economic doctrine clearly infringes the individual freedom in investment to the extent that some sectors were completely closed to the competition between private individuals. But as we can hear the liberals preaching, we have to acknowledge the quite admirable consequences of de Gaulle's authoritative economic program. It was eventually followed by 30 years of an unprecedented growth, known as the Trente Glorieuses. These decades of economic prosperity combined high productivity with high average wages and high consumptions, and were also characterized by a highly developed system of social benefits. Plus, the French standard of living, which had been damaged by both world wars, became one of the world's highest, putting an end to the communist upheavals. Hence, the Dirigiste program of de Gaulle put the French economy back on track, turning over a new leaf from the deleterious economic instabilities of the end of the Second World War, bolstering national security. But let's come back to the present now and still remain in France. When speaking about national security, it is nowadays quite common to automatically associate it with the fight against terrorism. Yesterday was the 4th commemoration of the November 2015 Paris attacks, a series of coordinated terrorist attacks that took place on the 13th November 2015 in Paris. The attackers killed 130 people, including 90 people at the Bataclan Theater. One traumatized survivor committed suicide in November 2017 and was recognized as the 131st victim in June 2019. Another 430 people were injured and almost 100 seriously. These attacks were the deadliest in France since the Second World War and the second deadliest in the European Union since the Madrid train bombing in 2004.
On the point.
No, thank you. A state of emergency, or l'état d'urgence in French, was declared following the November attacks. Expired in November 2017, it consisted of disposition to grant special power to the executive branch in case of exceptional circumstances, like those which were met. The special powers infringed individual freedom. As of July 2016, almost 3,600 houses had been raided under the state of emergency, leading to more than 400 arrests. But they allowed the seizure of more than 500 weapons, including 40 war weapons, in the context of a constant terrorist threat in Western Europe, as Euronews put it in April 2017. Plus, according to a 2015 government report, 11 attempted terrorist attacks had been foiled thanks to the administrative searches allowed by the emergency state. No, thank you, both of you. In such exceptional conditions, where the integrity of the nation's territory is endangered, where the security of the citizen is vulnerable, hence, where the national security is not ensured, jeopardizing the individual freedom of some individuals, those potentially causing security threats, was necessary. Because the overwhelming majority of the people of the population was not subjected to house arrest, to terrorist-linked administrative searches, or seizures without judiciary oversight, which the emergency state allowed. Nor did it lead to racial or communitarian profiling. The risk was solely assessed by the behavior and the antecedents of the individual, and certainly not by their ethnicity or their social or cultural background, which would have been purely intolerable. None of these measures were those of the garrison state, which would have brought the reign of terror back. Those were measures to ensure the physical security of the greatest number of the frightened and threatened residents of France. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morgan, for your speech, and I think this thing isn't working. So I'm going to go to the front and change it just to a generic slide. And welcome to the front to oppose the motion, please work, Ms. Beth McSorley. Here we go. There we go. This is broken. Sorry.
Evening all. I was going to make a joke about the fact that my name was on the screen and everybody could see it, and therefore anybody could track me and the government can see me, but I was just and I also kind of set up the first part of my speech as well, dig at the Irish government, assuming that Connor and Jude would go first, but that also didn't happen, so done the first part of the speech. First, some rebuttal. First, some rebuttal. You mentioned about minimising crime rates, but you didn't really elucidate really what national security meant apart from that. And to the opposition, that was problematic for us because at what point does the state intervene? At what point or what can the military do? And you just didn't address these, so that leaves a concept of national security and its boundaries and regulations and safeguards far too vague for actual legal usage, and it just leaves it far too open for corruption. I can think of too many examples like China, Cuba, USSR, so many things are done in the name of national security. It just doesn't work. So, first things first, just wanted to get it out of the way. This debate is the tip of a massive iceberg, and it touches on so many different issues. But I will be focusing on modern issues, primarily the conflict of international terrorism and high-tech communication. Our second opposition speaker will focus on terrorism more targetedly, and the regime will elicit the concept of slippery slope into mass surveillance and scaremongering. So, first things first, what exactly is individual liberty? So we thought it was a notoriously difficult concept to pin down, and therefore we, as the opposition, would like to submit that it pertains to all the rights and freedoms contained within the UN Charter of Fundamental Rights. Don't ask me what they are, it's my course and I still don't know what they are. Connor should also know it, but no. So for example, your right to privacy, your right to private family life, and the right not to be tortured. Basically the right to choose to live, or the right to choose to live as you wish. So, where do you draw that line between individual liberty and so-called national security? Germany and Austria both banned any display of the swastika and have made denying the Holocaust a crime. In Poland, any association with Poland and the Holocaust is illegal. They're trying to sue Netflix at the moment for that documentary. Yes.
Just your point about Germany. Sure, that's an example of individual liberty successfully being infringed for a genuine and right reason.
By Hitler?
No, by not allowing by not allowing the swastika to be shown. Germany is infringing your liberty to do that or to produce content of that work, and that is a right reason why your liberty should be confined in that regard.
Some people would argue that the swastika as a art deco is like great history, but I'll accept your point. The US places no restrictions on flying the Confederate battle flag, which many consider a symbol of racism. And it also doesn't prohibit hate speech. Like, if you try to read the American Constitution, it's very liberal, ironically. In the climate of fear that followed, like terrorist attacks like 9/11 or San Bernardino, frightened like citizens of a nation will often grant their government extraordinary powers. Hitler, in 1933, after the Reichstag fire, pushed through this Enabling Act, which granted him dictatorial powers allegedly to fight communism. You know how that ended up. So, the failure to protect and promote the right to privacy is about more than an inability to agree on a definition or conceptualization of your individual liberty or your right to privacy. Rather, because that right is considered to be like a fundamental safeguard, it's viewed by the state as a barrier to controlling citizens, so some people think. Privacy, many people argue, is the heart of most people's basic understanding of your own human dignity, and the ability to make your own autonomous choices about your own lives and your own relationships without any outside interference and intimidation. Basically, the state is not your mother, and it's central to who we are as human beings. Yes.
Beth, what you did is you're showing a very good argument of where the state shouldn't intervene to a ridiculous degree. You're not actually giving us a level of what is acceptable for the state to intervene here. So what do you think is that level?
Getting to that, I think.
What?
And getting to that. So autonomy is not just about the subjective capacity of an individual to make a decision, but also having other outside national interests to make such a decision possible. So privacy confers those external conditions. So because your own private autonomy and you yourself as a person are a citizen of a state and you are a key component of public life and debate, privacy is it's not only to do yourself, but it's also to do for the public good. If the state seeks to control its own population, however, its privacy is viewed as an impediment. It's therefore conceptualized as hampering security, development, and modernization. I'm just immediately thinking of China and drones and stuff. Basically, this debate isn't a particularly good example, but it creates this really simplistic idea and choice between competing values. You either have dignity or you have convenience. You either have freedom or you have control, and you either have security or you have somebody off in the bushes doing their thing. So basically, we can't lie. Freedom entails risk. You always have the idea so if somebody's carrying a gun, then they're gonna mass shooting that. You can't guarantee that that's not what's gonna happen. However, North Korea does have no known terrorist attacks. You can't really go, how do I know this? But nobody really wants to live there, as far as I'm aware. And Western Europe and the US have suffered many terrorist attacks, but they do remain the destination of choice for people fleeing conflict and repressive regimes. And coincidentally, Western Europe has a better human rights record than North Korea or China. Then there's the thing with China. But anyway, just to finish up, I know I'm a long time. Fear, an old Dutch saying, says is a bad counsellor. So you shouldn't let your fear of what might happen control an entire population. So vote for us.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. McSorley. Now, please welcome to speak second for the proposition, Mr. Jude Perry.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to summarise some of the words by the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he argued that it is legitimate for the state to exercise authority over its citizens in order to ensure the communal interest of those citizens. And over time, if that authority is implemented justifiably, we will reach a more egalitarian society. That is the crux of our argument tonight. And I want to clear up a few facts or fear-mongering that the opposition may pander to. That we are in favour of frisk and search, torture, or mass surveillance. These policies are wrong and unjust. But what we will argue is that we must sacrifice some of our own liberty in order to ensure the collective security of all of us, in order to ensure that we can all enjoy and maintain our own lives in society. And this debate is so much more than about terrorism. We respect a person's right to freedom, fundamentally, but we believe at times that we must compromise on our own interests to protect the interests of us all. And in our daily lives, we compromise on our individual liberty. We submit to having driving licenses for the common safety of other road users. We emphasise, in most cases, and in most cases it should be emphasised, that vaccinations are mandatory. And we often look down on people if they don't ensure that their kids have the proper vaccinations, and rightly so, because the well-being and security of other children are at risk. And in airports, we allow our liberty to be compromised by submitting to extensive searches and security protocols in order to ensure the peace of mind and security of other travellers and those citizens on the ground. The functioning of our society requires us to compromise on our liberty in small places every day, and we do so subconsciously. But in fact, we live in a time when individuality and the right to determine one's future is at its highest. We are more freer now than we've ever been. While Ms. McSorley seems to be living in the past, but I would like to cast our eyes to a more honest reflection of it. In the 1950s in Ireland, extensive censorship under Section 31 of the Broadcasting Act, in which books which reference sexual liberalisation, coercion against actions against the state, assertions against the Catholic Church were all monitored. That is no longer. Even not so far back in the United Kingdom, in the 1970s, every means of communication we had was monitored by the state. When we made a letter, we entrusted the Royal Mail to deliver our correspondence, the utility of the state. And when we used the phone, the company which ran the phone was ran by the state, and we trusted that the state was not listening into our conversations. The state ran a monopoly 20, 30 years ago. The only difference now is that that monopoly is being changed to private industries. The state doesn't have the same influence it had. But in order to maintain our lifestyle and society we participate in, we have to be able to compromise slightly. By virtue of being at this university, by virtue of working in the job that we do, and by virtue of travelling to different countries in the summer and other times, they all require us to sacrifice our liberty in order to enjoy our lives.
On that point.
Right. And while the theme of this debate is national security, we live in an unsecure world. A world in which our existence is threatened by forces outside and within our border. People's motivations are more complicated, what we are exposed to online is more intense, and the majority of those that do engage in extremist activities are radicalised at home. In my view, there is substantial evidence that if a person is a threat to society, as can be seen by what they do online and other places, then the state, if that person is going to cause fatalities to others, should be within its right to stop them. Now, is this House about to embrace some cavalier libertarian ideas in which driving licences are an infringement upon our liberty? But let me remind you that organisations such as the National Rifle Association in the United States causes arguments of individual liberty to justify blocking basic background checks. And while this other argument may be sympathetic to some of our socialist friends in the room, that people who are well off and who are against paying their fair share of taxes, in which they are perfectly within their means to pay, argue that those taxes, which support services and help people who cannot unfortunately help themselves, that being forced to pay them is an infringement on liberty. They make those arguments. And while I did not want to frame this debate around terrorism, I would like to mention one of the most startling events in our lifetime so far, and that is the September 11th attacks in 2001 on the World Trade Center. Now, the world changed that day, but it signaled that we all needed to take responsibility and look beyond our own interests and to the interests of all of us as a society. And while Ms. McSorley said fear is a bad counsellor, she's correct. But what is a worse counsellor? Isn't it? Yeah.
You bring up like 9/11 and stuff, and like obviously that was used as like this is going to happen again, national security. An outcome of that was the CIA used a lot of torture. Are you suggesting that torture is okay to ensure national security?
No, I made that clear from the outset of my speech. But we don't condone torture, frisk and search, and those items. They're wrong. But what I do believe is that we all have a duty to give away part of our own individual liberty in order to protect the collective well-being of society, as Rousseau asserted. And just to conclude, we compromise in our liberty every day, subconsciously, without even knowing, without thinking about it. But I don't believe we should reject that. And in order for us to look beyond ourselves and to look to the person sitting across from us and to the other people in the international community, because it is a globalised community, we have to be able to compromise on our own individualism. And I would ask all of you to support the proposition tonight in believing that national security is more important than individual liberty. Thank you.
May I please welcome to give his first speech for the society, Mr. Keir Crozier.
Ladies and gentlemen, our friends in the proposition have tried to tell you that we ought to surrender some measure of our individual liberty in order that we might increase our collective security. I am here to tell you that not only is this undesirable, but that it is impossible. We would be greatly mistaken if we were to allow ourselves to be misled into the fallacy of believing that liberty and security were two sides of some zero-sum calculation to juxtapose ends of a theoretical seesaw, and that by giving away some measure of the former, we should invariably increase our measure of the latter. Indeed, far from being a finely balanced trade-off, even a Faustian bargain, the proposition's argument is a con, leaving us both less free and less secure. I am sure that a great many ladies and gentlemen of the House tonight will be familiar with what happened here in Northern Ireland, in Belfast in the early 1970s, with the introduction of internment, or Operation Demetrius as it was officially known. Over the space of 2 days, 342 people, all of them from nationalist backgrounds, the vast majority of them Roman Catholic, were arrested and imprisoned without trial. Over the following 4 days, 25 people were killed, and 7,000 forced to flee their homes as a result of the street violence that followed. Internment continued for 4 years, during which time 1,981 people were interned, 1,874 of whom were from nationalist backgrounds.
On that point,
I'll take it.
not to defend internment, but in the 50s the border campaign was completely stopped by internment on either side of the border. Just wondering what you think of that.
Absolutely, and it was one of the reasons why they brought it back in the 1970s. But the fact that it worked then was not automatically proof that it would work again, and the evidence, as I provide and will continue to provide, showed that it was an unmitigated disaster for the Stormont Executive, which was dissolved soon after the implementation of internment, and indeed for the British government and their perception for them among the nationalist Catholic community in Northern Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not need me to tell you how morally indefensible internment was. But what is more, even the coldest, most arch pragmatist could not defend it, for it did not make us more secure. As the senior store and civil servant, Sir Kenneth Bloomfield observed, it soon became clear that far from quelling the uprising, the policy hugely increased recruitment to the IRA. More recent parallels are easy to draw when we look at, for example, Guantanamo Bay, where upwards of 700 prisoners have been detained without trial since 2001, 9 of whom died in custody, and more than a decade on from former President Barack Obama's promise that Guantanamo Bay would be closed, it's still there, and 40 inmates still remain in custody without trial. We can look closer to home when we look at our 7-day limit for imprisonment without charge was doubled to 14 days in 2003, and then again to 28 days in 2005. There were failed attempts to increase this to 90 days, and then compromised to 42 days, but these were mercifully halted by Parliament, who saw it for what it was: draconian measures, inhumane, and also unnecessary. They were absolutely right to do so, as can be attested by the views of the former Chief Inspector of the Constabulary, Lord Baer, who said, extending pre-charge detention will most certainly be a propaganda coup for Al-Qaeda. And the then Security Minister, Lord West, who said that he had yet to be convinced that we absolutely needed more than 28 days. Once again, the evidence was on their side, as it is on our side tonight, as Operation Over, the largest anti-terror operation ever to take place in Britain, following the attempt to blow up 10 transatlantic airliners at Heathrow in 2006. All of the 17 suspects who were charged were done so within 21 days. To have extended the detention period, therefore, would not only have been a gross infringement on our individual liberties, but would also have been entirely unnecessary.
On that point.
Yes.
But, so, yeah, I get what you're saying, that, you can't extend this pre-charge detention period, but weren't these people arrested under an existing, but albeit shorter, pre-charge detention period?
They were, but the government at the time, and indeed it passed the Commons, the 42-day extent, was shot down in the Lords, thankfully. The Commons voted to extend it to 42 days. The point that I'm making with this case is, not only were 42 days way in excess of what was needed, but actually the existing 28 days have proven more than sufficient in that of the 21 people who were charged, or the 7 people who were charged, all of them, the evidence was found within 21 days, showing that the existing legislation was not only sufficient, but actually went above and beyond what was needed, and certainly didn't need extended. So, to have extended the detention period, therefore, would not only have been a gross infringement on our individual liberties, but would also have been entirely unnecessary, whilst risking fueling the resentment and backlash of those against whom we had sought security in the first place. The opposition tonight, ladies and gentlemen, have been remarkably heavy on rhetoric and remarkably light on detail. It's all very well saying that they would like to increase our security. Wouldn't we all? But what kind of vision of this secure nation of the future do they advocate? What measures will they take to achieve it? They don't know. Whereas I can tell you exactly what we purport to defend. Habeas corpus, the right to fair trial, the right to freedom of speech, and the right to a private... Yes.
Very much mentioned the right to a trial.
Yes.
That is a curtailment of liberty because you've done something wrong to serve the social security of the entire nation. The criminal justice system is a clear example of the curtailment of liberty for the greater good of security of society.
Well, the right to a fair trial is absolutely an offensive liberty. It means that sentences cannot be imposed arbitrarily on the wish and whim of a dictator or a despot. The fact that you stand trial in front of a jury of your peers and then are found to be guilty or not guilty and are sentenced accordingly. The right to freedom of speech and to private, personal and family life. These are the values upon which our great nation and all other free nations are built. And we must not throw them away in pursuit of a chimera. The American founding father James Madison famously said, "If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy." Posterity has proven him correct, and we should remember his words this evening and vote for the opposition to stand up for our individual liberties.
Speak last for the proposition, Mr. Colin.
Ladies and gents, I wanted to be opposition tonight. You know, like, why not? It's a pretty sexy motion and stuff. Yeah, liberty, you know, a few words. But the more in which I looked at it, and I realised that the proposition is a pretty tough argument.
as evident by the vote of prior opinion. But the more I delved into it, the more I came to the realisation is that we give up our liberty every day for the security of the nation. It's a simple fact. I heard a great quote one time that says, I don't argue, I just explain. And that's all the proposition is doing tonight. We're explaining the manners in which that we understand that we give up elements of our liberty for the greater good and security of the nation and all of its citizens. General Michael Collins stated that we have to learn that freedom imposes responsibilities. And I feel that this is what this room must learn tonight. We have to understand, I know it's not nice to realise it, but we do realise it, that we do sacrifice elements of our liberty every single day for the collective security and good of the nation. In its outlined in a national element how France's success in the post-war period came as a result of a curtailment of liberty. Jude brought up utilitarianism. Oh, thank you. He talked about how we are living in an area of unprecedented freedom. How the Royal Mail could have checked our post. Now, you imagine now, we've WhatsApp encrypted, very hard for governments to access. Back 50 or 40 years ago, that would have been absolutely unheard of. We are living in an age of unprecedented liberty and freedom. So much so, that is why we must ensure the collective security and continued success of national security and safety. It's difficult for us in the proposition tonight to accept the arguments of the opposition. We have no disagreement with their definition of liberty, nor do we disagree with their cherishment of liberty. All the things they have stated is correct. How internment was wrong, how torture is wrong. We do not argue that tonight. We're not some mad-capped fascists who say the security of the nation is something that needs to be protected at all costs. We understand that security over liberty sometimes gets it wrong. Sometimes. And there's been numerous examples listed by the opposition tonight, mainly focusing on the area of terrorism. Yet, we in the proposition tonight have illustrated very, very clearly how security over liberty succeeds every way of our life. Jude spoke about vaccines, and it was interesting Beth brought up Germany as well. Germany just today, or maybe yesterday, has made vaccines compulsory. Now, to those who are anti-vaxxers would say that is an infringement on my liberty. Yet, I'm sure no one in this room, at least I hope not, would say that they should have the right not to vaccinate their children. That's a debate for another night. There was also the topic of the NRA and gun control. This is the argument every time there is a tragic massacre in the United States, which the NRA pleads, this is our liberty to bear arms, our right to bear arms. They use liberty as this argument. Yes.
You're quite right to bring up the NRA, but the inconvenient truth is that really the mass shooting is a cultural phenomenon rather than a legal one. In Canada they have very similar laws on gun ownership to the USA, as they have in Switzerland. Neither nation sees anything like the level of gun crime. Even the USA, up until Columbine in the 1990s, that's the main reason why it's the most famous shooting, was it was the first of its type. The mass shooting was not really a big issue. Yet gun ownership has been there in the USA from the get-go. So I think it's an oversimplification to say that liberty, in terms of the right to bear arms,
I thank you for that point, because it brings me on to my next one. And I want to speak about a small town in Scotland called Dunblane. Now, the Dunblane massacre in the late 90s in Scotland resulted in a school caretaker who acquired 2 handguns, went into the school and massacred 16 children and 1 teacher. Now, this was unprecedented in the UK, this type of mass shooting. And what did the UK do in response to it? They immediately implemented effective gun control legislation, curtailing the rights and liberties of those to own handguns. And that's an interesting point as well about the cultural phenomenon. They stopped this phenomenon before it could be allowed to exacerbate and spread across the nation. They did this by the curtailment of liberty.
On that point,
it
is just factually incorrect to say that they eliminated all gun violence. If you are aware of the murder of the MP Joe Knox, who was murdered with a handgun, bought illegally. But it appears that your side does not recognize the fact that, specifically when it comes to guns and things that are illegal, they are available readily on the black market, and there's nothing that the state can do to stop it.
That's a fair point. I'd like to clarify that I was referring to mass shootings and the culture of mass shootings as we see in the US. The tragedy of Joe Cox's murder is a clear example, and the fact that he bought that illegally rather than he bought that on the market illustrates again that this is all the state can do. And listen, people will find access to guns, and that's something the state cannot control. That is just the nature of the society that we live in. And that man was subsequently prosecuted under the criminal law. And I brought this point up in the POI. When we subject ourselves to the criminal justice system, we accept that our liberty can be curtailed for the security of the nation. Surely nobody in this room can argue against the implementation of the criminal justice system. Yes, it has its imperfections. Yes, it sometimes does not work. But as a whole, as a utilitarian society, we have to accept that we must have some element of a criminal justice system within our society. And I think, that clearly illustrates why our side wins. Because we've explained and outlined that we sacrifice our liberty every day. I can't go to the pub now and have 10 pints and drive in my car. I'm sure I could. But if I get stopped by the PSNI and get done for drink driving, I would be arrested. That is a curtailment of my liberty, but as a collective of society, prevents me from crashing my car into somebody on the side of the road. It prevents harm to those in society. And that is what the curtailment of liberty and our argument is about. It's about the prevention of harm principle. And anyone who's done criminal law understands that is the key element to justice, is the prevention of harm. And ladies and gentlemen, it's very, very clear tonight, as uncomfortable as you may have been coming into this debate that you would agree with the opposition, I was myself. But having looked at it and understood it and studied it, we sacrifice our liberty every single day to live in the society that we live in, a society with unprecedented freedom, and a society with unprecedented opportunity. I would urge you to vote for the proposition. Thank you.
May I please welcome to conclude for the opposition and indeed the debate in her first speech to the society, Ms. Regina Sweeney.
Okay, so first thing I want to address is the proposition's argument that it's necessary for us to curtail our own freedoms in order to ensure our security against terrorism cases. Well, the reality is it just isn't the truth. It's possible, and it has happened in the past, for example, during the Troubles, for the intelligence agencies to gain information through volume informants within communities. It's not necessary to curtail it's not necessary to curtail the freedoms of everyone else in order to prevent those terrorist attacks occurring in the first place. Furthermore, stopping someone from committing a terrorist attack isn't a curtailment of their freedom, because we are ensuring the freedom of everyone else. So I want to get on to my main point. Fundamentally, when we place greater importance upon national security than individual liberty, we risk creating a gateway where government can gradually erode freedoms little by little for their own purposes under false guise of national security. For example, a state that has done this as under false pretense of national security and against our freedoms. Take China's treatment of the Uyghur minority. In their native Xinjiang, which is actually an autonomous region of China, the government of China has a vested interest in maintaining power over that region due to its location, its very special location. For example, they
It's going to take time. Sorry, speak to me.
some of you may or may not have heard about the $1 trillion Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese government has built through the Xinjiang province in China, connecting them to, which will connect them to 70 other countries, broadening their power and their influence. Clearly, Beijing has a lot of invested in the region, but that has been without consequence for the citizens themselves. So in China, it's now as a consequence of this, found itself to be one of the most heavily policed regions in the world, with tens of thousands of facial recognition cameras and surveillance apps on the phones.
On that point.
Sure.
Most democracies actually have the exact same thing in place. The UK is the most surveillance heavy state in the entire world. I will be videoed by about 10 different cameras whilst I'm walking the practitioner. So the idea that this is genuinely for it, there's not just dictatorships, there's the so-called free countries also do it.
Well, that's true, but I think with the next point we're starting to see why it's under false pretenses. So, to date, there have been 2 million Uyghurs within Xinjiang imprisoned in so-called re-education internment camps. People being detained for most plenty of reasons, including a set of across a different time zone or communicating with people in other countries, including family members. And what's this in the name of? National security. But that can't be the case, because the reasons are clearly so flimsy. It's clear that due to China's investment in that region that they've been able to create this argument, well, false argument, that that is necessary for them to infringe on the populace's freedoms to maintain security. So the reality is that the government can, if we allow them the freedom to erode and liberties in our name, they can come up with whatever ridiculous justification they want for their own aims. So in conclusion, reducing or removing liberties of citizenry does not necessarily work in improving security, and really our rights and freedoms mean nothing if we are willing to throw them away at the drop of a hat the moment we feel a little threatened.
Another round of applause for what Miss Sweeney's made the speech. So now it is time for questions. This is where you get a chance to ask a question to either our sides. We will start off with questions for the proposition. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I will go to Mr. Mark Gilmore.
Animal Farm. Ready Player One, 1984. Sonic the Hedgehog. All excellent examples of literature where it is demonstrated that sometimes we need to rise up against a tyrannical government. Now, I think what has been presented for the proposition this evening has been somewhat oxymoronic, and that is because national security, in essence, is to protect individual liberty. And Connor excellently brought up social contract theory. But one of the core components of social contract theory is you use the least amount of force required to ensure liberty in the first place. So if you're saying that national security is above individual liberty, you're essentially saying that national security itself is contradicting its very own goal. Now that's a bit confusing, but do you get what I mean now?
I'm going to try it.
Do you wish to go to rephrase our sentence?
I understand. Do you have any chance to do law? Yeah, I understand the point about social contract theory and about, the least force. What we were talking about today is not force. It's a method of which you do sacrifice a small element of your liberty to gain that collective security. The implementation of the criminal justice system is not force. Even monitoring of phone calls via of course through judgments or via through necessary means is not force.
is through a clear method that is understood via the social contract that keeps us safe.
Can I clarify something there?
Yeah.
No.
No.
I had enough last year.
I could have said yes, but I wasn't feeling kind. Opposition to response.
Well, I'm trying to think of something because the whole Sonic the Hedgehog thing kind of went over my head a wee bit. Yeah, no, like when I was thinking about the argument earlier, I was just like, national security, Hunger Games-esque, like Divergent, like quote the big when I was like 14. And the idea that a state is so impingent upon its citizens' rights just to protect itself. And I think maybe that was what we were thinking of earlier, rather than, yes, through social contract theory, we aren't arguing for that every citizen should be able to do what they want all the time, and we're not like, it's very obvious we're not all living off in the last frontier in Alaska. So it's the idea that we should all protect each other using our individual.
So, are there any questions for the opposition? Mr. Shane McGuinness.
Yes, Colin mentioned earlier on John Stuart Mill's harm principle. What is the opposition's view on this?
I think the harm principle in this is absolutely crucial to this. Well, that's at the end ultimately a libertarian philosophy, that the idea that anything is justifiable as long as it does not cause harm to others, and that's essentially the liberties which we have seen stripped from people, such as imprisonment without trial, internment here or through Guantanamo Bay. They take away that principle, they run completely counter to it, and therefore I'm absolutely in agreement with John Stuart Mill's principle, and I think it is our side which better represents it than the proposition.
Proposition to respond?
Well, I think I was going to raise 2 points. First on the harm principle. The harm principle was written in a time when harm had a narrow definition, and when we don't actually recognise how harm constitutes things such as hate speech and other things like that, which can cause harm, but John Stuart Mill did not actually foresee such things. And I think that the opposition has tried to paint us as supporters of authoritarian regimes. You mentioned China and North Korea, but those are regimes that we acknowledge to be wrong. But the crux of our argument is that we are able to compromise on small parts of our liberty, as we do on a daily basis, in order to increase the collective security of us all. That's why I think liberty and security go hand in hand.
Okay, now it's time for abstaining questions. Just for the sake of the room, so you know what abstaining questions are. These are questions which can be directed to both sides equally. Don't try and get a question for the opposition in here, so I'll be on you like a puma. On that note, I'm going to go for Mr. Matthew Bryson.
So we've heard quite a few examples today, but I think both sides have actually missed one of the most important and poignant ones, which is today's society. We do live in a fairly safe society, yet we also live in a society which is fairly free. So my simple question to both sides is, what do you believe the UK Parliament prioritises? National security or individual liberty?
So, I just heard that. So, opposition to respond first, and the next abstaining question will be opposition to respond first. So, you guys decide amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I think the question's quite limited in scope, because you can't, just pick one and then forget the other. As we've said today, that they go hand in hand, and the argument we have, you require national security to enjoy the liberty. As you said yourself, we're living in a time when we're the most free, the most we can use our liberties because we have that security, and we must protect it. And to lose a slight element of liberty to protect that, and use France as an example. After the tragic events of 2015 in France, France curtailed an element of the liberties to protect the French society. A society that everybody understands and agrees as one of the most liberal and the most successful societies in European history. So we can understand that they curtailed the liberty. So I don't think there is merit in saying which the UK Parliament prioritises, because they both go hand in hand and depend on each specific situation.
I think that's a very interesting question. Favourite question we've got tonight, actually. But I would say, given the composition of Parliament at the minute, when you look at the record of the new Labour government between 1997 and 2010, that government introduced over 3,000 new laws, more Home Office legislation than all previous governments combined. It was a hugely legislative and probably most authoritarian regime we've had since the Second World War. And obviously that was during wartime, it was a different situation. And it must be said, since 2010, the Conservative-led governments and coalitions have repealed remarkably little of it. So I think we have to say the evidence is that our Parliament would be more in favour of national security and individual liberty on the evidence we have over the last 25 years.
So there's background again. Are there any questions for the proposition? There are going to be lots of questions tonight, and so I'm going to go to the back to Mr. James Orchard.
The proposition is a good example of France, especially during the Fourth Republic, and also mentioned the use of states of emergency. If I'm not mistaken, I think France has used the states of emergency since the war about 6 times, and 2 of those with regards to Algeria. When France declared the state of emergency in Algeria, they engaged in a crackdown in Algerian national sentiment, which led some of the accused committing acts of human rights abuses and torture. Well, I'm not arguing that anyone who argues for national security is arguing for that. Does the proposition not see that there's some legislation which may be brought in with the best of intentions can be misused when protecting so-called rights?
If I'm correct, you just said that the emergency states during the Algerian war allowed for exceptional measures that were negative for the individual. Is that what you meant? Alright. Actually, those were, I think, not minor cases, but cases that happened in a minority of times. Most of the times, the emergency state was both on the Algerian soil and on the French soil. And in both cases, it aimed primarily at limiting the possibility of terrorist attacks, and it managed to do so to a certain extent. But yeah, especially considering the Algerian case where the votes of the side were highly polarized, such cases were deemed to happen. But we should keep in mind that the major line or the spirit behind this, which were to foster the security, was followed and was eventually successful in leading to the independence of Algeria.
So the opposition response.
I don't know the ins and outs of that conflict, but our point on that would be that once you introduce regulations or laws which are vague and non-transparent, it's very easy for certain individuals to take advantage of those laws, and it creates this like slippery slope where one thing's okay, and then it becomes a grey area, and atrocities can occur. There's a couple of examples of that, not much, but
Are there any questions for the opposition? I'll go to Mr. Ben Callum.
Yeah, so during your speeches you all gave quite a lot of examples of where national security has stepped over the line, where it's stepped into tyrannical means. But do you not concede, as I think the proposition has portrayed nicely, that there are occasions in which national security is important and that it is successful?
I think national security is always important, there's no question of occasions about it. And of course it is sometimes successful, but I think the crux of my argument is that there is no obvious correlation between increasing the scope of the security forces, giving them more of a free hand, and introducing more legislation to reduce people's liberty, and an actual reduction in the dangers which people face. I mean, we've seen all this legislation brought in, and yet we still have terror attacks. And I don't think the option and the evidence would not be that what is needed is yet more legislation when we already are seeing the liberties being deprived with so little success.
That's a good question. I totally disagree with that point that the implementation of some laws and restricting our liberties has success. We have seen it in France. When France curtailed their liberties, there was numerous upon numerous terrorist attacks prevented in the final stage of France because of this legislation. That's a fact. You can look it up, you can look at the information. Because they had these powers, they could raid these homes and find homes with bombs ready to go in to a street of crowded people and take God knows how many lives. So that's a clear illustration of this curtailment of liberty working. And that is only within the small focus of terrorism, which seems to be the only real argument that the opposition is presenting here tonight.
Are there any abstaining questions? Yes, Mr. Matley.
Sorry, you both spoke about kind of situations of emergency kind of operations yourself in France. But isn't it a case that these operations begin and then they go on for years and years and years and they were intended for a matter of months, but they kind of never end? And isn't this the case whenever the state gets involved in anything? It just goes on and on and on and becomes the new norm.
I think the state should.
Sorry, it's opposition. You just like throwing things. Opposition response first.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like when we talk about policies such as Guantanamo Bay, I brought up in my speech, Barack Obama said he was going to do with Guantanamo in 2008. We're now in 2019, going into 2020. We've seen a whole president serve 2 terms, nearly see another president serve a term, and Donald Trump says he's not going to close it. So something was originally intended to be temporary, and yet it's still there. 9 people have died in Guantanamo Bay. The FBI agents cannot point to any major terrorism cases they've cracked, thanks to the stupid powers of the Patriot Act, which was introduced again in 2001, set down in 2005. Here we are 18 years later and it's still here. So you're absolutely right in your point.
I think the way in which conflict has evolved over the last century is that we are no longer dealing with state against state conflict and war. States are now having to deal with non-state actors such as terrorist organisations, cells which are very hard to find, very hard to pinpoint, and often they proliferate their ideology over online media. And actually, the majority of people who carry out these terrorist attacks are actually radicalised at home on their laptops, and are often indigenous leaders of states such as France and the US. So I think the programmes that states introduced to clamp down on this should continue as long as until security is being fulfilled. But it's hard to define when security is fulfilled, because we're in a grey area where you look back to the Second World War. Into the Cold War, it was very clear who we were fighting, where our threat was coming from. Now that is very hard to define, and unfortunately, the reality is the states have to continue these programs because they have to fight actors that they can't identify and that are hard to identify. So I think that these programs should continue until people have a peace of mind and there's relative security restored to our state and to our society.
Right, and so with that, we are concluding the debate for tonight. Apologies to anyone who had the hand up questions I didn't get to. Time is, as you can see, ticking on, and we could have gone on for quite a while on this. So what we're going to do now is, hopefully I'm in range. Yes, I am. We're going to have, you see, that's not tacky animation at all. Our vote of speakerability. This is on what side you think spoke best. As always, there'll be proposition, opposition, and abstentions. So all of you who believe the proposition spoke best tonight, please raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Raise your hands high. I'm 5'6" and I'm not good at looking.
Sure, that's fine enough. Okay.
And all those who believe, you okay?
Yeah.
We don't want a council member just dying on us.
Oh, sure, but yes, get the insurance.
it would be a bit of entertainment. Oh,
You can have a chair.
Pardon?
You have a chair.
No.
What do you think, Connor?
No. I was going to make a joke there, but then I couldn't think of a joke. So anyone who wishes to vote for the opposition, if you think the opposition spoke better tonight, please raise your hands and say nay.
Nay.
Oh, I thought this was going to go first.
I thought so as well, but see, it's that precedent.
And all those who wish to abstain on the motion, who believe both sides spoke equally well, equally terribly, or don't really mind, please raise your hands and say meh.
Meh.
Madam Secretary, without dying, could you please read back the votes?
The vote on speaker ability, the motion discussed supports national security over individual liberty. Proposition got 30 votes, opposition got 5, and abstentions got 5. So with that, the proposition.
The proposition has been Before we go, I've got a couple of things to say. I know time's taking on, but I've got a couple of things to go through. Guys, I know the pub's good, but like, there's always time for admin, so like, you know. But anyway, so the announcements are as follows. Before we go, the Godkin debate is next week. If you haven't signed up for that, you're a new speaker, get yourself signed up. It's a great debate. There will also be a workshop for those of you who are going to the Godkin debate or otherwise new speakers. That will be happening on the Wednesday. It will be organised by Mr. Alton McSparrow, who isn't. He was in that chair, but he's going. He's there. There'll be details about your workshop, which is next Wednesday, going on very soon. Number 2 on my list. If you want to buy a literary lapel pin, which are in that bag, Mr. Colmagall was wearing one, they're £3.50. Go up to the front. If you want to buy a membership, which costs £5 and gets you a really cool looking membership card, also go up to the front. And that will give you access to our Christmas dinner, which will be happening on the 10th of December. There'll be sign-ups for that soon. Number 3, if you're interested in going down to Cork for the IV, which I very much encourage you to do, please speak to Miss Becca McMinn, who is at the back there waving, and she will sort out all of your problems, but not all of them. She's not a therapist. So, on that note, are there any other slides? No, there's just the darkness of the void. So on that note, I declare this meeting adjourned!